subtracting. Remember, if they're subtracting, you switch the sign. There we go. Of everything in the parentheses after, and then you just add 3 plus negative 5 is negative 2. And negative 2i plus negative 6i is negative 8i. Cool? That was a similar problem to number 2 off of the quiz, and several people missed it because they forgot to distribute that negative sign. All right, number 2. You should be multiplying by 1 plus I on top and bottom. Remember, you switch the sign of whatever's on that bottom. Then you FOIL 2 plus 2i minus I squared over 1 plus I minus I squared. Okay? On the bottom, plus I and minus I cancel out. And then I get 1. This becomes plus 1. So 1 plus 1 is 2. On top, these two combine to make just a regular I. This right here becomes a plus 1. 2 plus 1 is 3 plus I. And that is the correct answer there. These are not the exact problems off the quiz, but number 1 looks like number 2 off of the quiz, subtracting. And number 2 looks like number 4 off of the quiz, dividing. And let's review one more thing. I'd like you to take the answer from number 1, this answer right here, and find the absolute value of that. Absolute value. What does absolute value even mean? Distance from 0. Now, you did not need to graph it, but let's say I did. Negative 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, negative 2, 8. I am looking for that distance right there, right? So, how far down is that? 8? And how far over? So that is a Pythagorean theorem, right? 2 squared plus 8 squared equals c squared. 4 plus 64 equals c squared. 68. So you take the square root, so the square root of 68. So when you're talking about absolute value, do you use the negative sign? No. But you could. You could. Because what is negative 2 squared? 4. What is negative 8 squared? 64. So if you use the negative signs, you have to remember to keep them in parentheses. Other than that, that's it. So there's your absolute value, just to remind you to review that. All right. On the next sheet of graph paper, we're going to take a few notes. Go ahead and write down the objective of today. So today we're going to graph and solve quadratic inequalities. We've already graphed linear inequalities this year. We've already solved linear inequalities this year. We've also graphed absolute values, and we've also graphed solved absolute value equations. So today we're going to graph this problem. Y is greater than or equal to x squared plus 6x plus 1. When you're graphing a quadratic, what item do you have to find first? Debbie. You could. We never really did. What item do you have to find first that the whole graph is based on? You're close. AOS. Axis of symmetry. AOS. And the formula for that is x equals negative b over 2a. Part of the quadratic formula, not the entire. Please, at this time, go ahead and plug in your b, your a, and figure out what x is. So I got negative 3. Now that I have the x part, what other thing do I need in order to graph this? I need y. How do I find y? Try to get other people involved. You're doing a good job though. Yeah, plug it in, Take a minute, plug x in, tell me what y is. So if you plug in negative 3, you should have it typed in, if you're typing it in your calculator, negative 3 squared plus 6 times negative 5. And I believe if you type that in, you get negative 4. Am I right? That means my vertex is at negative 3, negative 4. So let's go ahead and plot that point. Negative 3, negative 4. There's that lovely point. Well, I've got that point. How do I get the other points to go around it to make it? That is correct. I make that XY table. Remember, your X's are always 1 and 2. Your Y's then are 1 and 4. And how you got that was 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4. And what do you need to multiply them by for this specific problem? A, which is 1. So I don't really need to multiply them. So I'm going to graph that. I go over 1 and up 1 on both sides, and over 2, up 1, 2, 3, 4 on both sides. So, as of right now, we've not learned a new thing yet today, right? I guess I need to teach something new. Would this be a solid parabola or a dotted parabola? How'd you know already? I didn't even teach you yet. Yeah, it's got the line underneath it. So, okay, I guess I haven't taught anything new yet, right? You guys are on it. You know when I got you, right? All right, solid. Okay. Well, it's an inequality, which means I have to shade. Now, I'm either shading inside the parabola or outside. How would I figure that out? Plug in a number? Okay, what number? What number you want? Negative 3 what? Negative 3, 0? I could do that. I'm lazy. Can you pick an easier one? 0, 0? Yeah, we can plug in 0, 0. You can plug in negative 3, 0. That's not wrong, by the way. You want to choose negative 3? You can pick any point you want as long as it is not on this U. If it's on the U, you cannot pick it. Make sense? All right, 0, 0. Plug in 0, 0. Tell me, is it true or is it false? I like 0, 0 because watch this. 0 greater than or equal to? Nope, nope. But I don't have to do very much work with that. Is 0 greater than or equal to 5? No, so I cannot shade over this point, and this point is on the, so I need to shade on the, that's correct. Now notice I shaded the whole way up. That's a key thing a lot of people don't do. Make sure you shade the whole way up, make it pretty. And that's it. Any questions so far? All right. Let's do 2 on the same graph. What if I have 2 on the same graph? So we found our vertex to be 0, 9. We made our chart. And then we plotted our points. Now, solid or dotted U? Solid? What point do you guys want to pick to see if it's right? 0, 0. It's an easy one, right? I love 0, 0. Is 0 less than or equal to 9? Yes. Now, I told you, when you shade very lightly. So I'm going to use a light yellow here. So I'm shading in the middle, right? Okay. Yes, make sure it uses as much of that graph as you can. Okay? And the reason is because now we're putting 2 on the same graph. We're trying to see where do they overlap. So, what's the difference between the first equation and the second equation? How many? 2 parentheses, or I like to think of it as 1 set of parentheses. Okay? And the squares on the outside. Well, I have a famous phrase I tried to ingrain in your head. Anybody remember that phrase? That's correct. Switch the sign of what's inside, keep the sign So if I do that, what numbers do I get? I get 3, -5, don't I? Does that make sense? Because I switched this sign, kept this sign. We'll deal with him in a minute. So all I found so far is the vertex. Plot that point. I want to switch back to black here. 3. You mean just the 2? This is actually considered in vertex form already. So when you see the parentheses with the squared, you can get that vertex right away with doing no work at all. It's actually the easy equation to do. All right, so we need to make our XY chart, right? All right, Sarah, what are my X numbers? What are my Y? Good. Always the same. Always the same. But now I need to figure out, do I need to multiply by anything? That's where that 2 comes into play. Now that's where that 2 comes into play. I'm going to multiply these both by 2. That's okay. That's kind of why this is like the perfect topic to go over. Because some of you are just starting on that chapter review and you're like, wait, how do I grab? Here's our review. So from my vertex, I go over 1 and up 2. And then I go over 2 and up 8. 5, 6, 7, 8. 2, 8. Solid or dotted this time? Dotted. Make sure you continue it up until you at least cross over the other parabola. Now, what point are we going to pick this time? You want to pick 0, 0? That's fine. Pick 0, 0. Tell me is it true or false. Go for it. So we plugged in 0, 0. We got 0 is less than 13. And we said, yes, that's true. So that means I'm shading, well, where is 0, 0 compared to the dotted one? On the inside or outside? Outside. It is on the outside. So I've got a shade on the outside, but I want to cover over the yellow portion up here that's on the outside of that. So I'm just going to make it really dark, the portion that I want. Go the whole way down here. And that is the answer. I'm only shading really dark the portion that works for both now. And that's all. Any questions? Alright, so we've graphed quadratic inequalities. According to our objective, what else do we need to do? We need to solve. So let's do a solving problem. Here's my lovely solving problem. So for this problem, when it says solve, we are looking for x-intercept. X-intercept means that y is 0. And remember from before, we have 2 ways of doing that. That would be factoring or quadratic formula. Well, this problem is actually easier to do if we factor it. So I'm going to factor it into x plus 5, x plus 1. Well, now that I factored it, what do I need to do with each of those pieces? Perfect. Set them equal to 0 real quick. If you do that, you should get x equals -5, x equals -1, right? Now, we're trying to figure out what x values I can plug into this original equation that will make it true. Well, the easiest way to do this then is to graph those two on a number line. So I'm going to graph -5 and -1 on a number line. For me, remember, you don't need to put the number 0 on. Now, open or close dots at -5 and -1. How'd you guys know that already? Good. Yeah, the sign. The sign doesn't have an equal sign, so it'll open. Okay? Everybody okay so far? So now we need to figure out where to shade. Now, Absolutely, in my desk drawer, honey. All right, so don't draw this next part. I'm just going to show you what we're looking for. You ready? Remember when we were doing that first graph, we either shaded in the middle or we shaded on the outside? That's what I'm trying to figure out. What x values make it true? Am I going to be shading on the outside or am I going to be shading on the inside? But I don't want to have to graph the entire thing. That makes sense? You don't want to have to graph the entire thing. So we're just making the number line to help us. All right. What number do you want to plug in for x to see if it's true? Yeah, let's plug in 0. Now I'm going to use this equation that I've already got with the 0 in it. Is 0 less than 5? What? 0 is less than 5. So right here is 0, right? So I'm going to shade over it. If I shade it there, guess where else I have to shade? On the other side, right? Does that make sense to everybody, that we have to shade on the outside for both? Okay. Well, now we just have to write our answers. But before we do that, we need to remember about these or and these and problems. Back in chapter 1, you guys actually had to write out your answers. You got it. You got it. All right, so this is an or problem, right? So I like to write the word or. By the way, if it's an and problem, you do not get to write the word and. And is too long to write. A-N-D, that's a whole 3 letters. Please don't write that. That's just too many letters to write, but or is only 2. So it's okay. That's my thought process, right? Right, Les? All right. X is what compared to negative 1? Is it greater? Is it less than? It's greater. Notice it's being shaded greater. Does that make sense? How about over here? X compared to negative 5. Am I shading bigger or smaller? Any questions on that? One thing to help you with the people that have trouble with arrows, on an or problem, notice the arrows are facing the way that you shaded. Does that make sense? That's just a little hint. Well, we need to do one other type of problem to make sure we've got this down. We just did the or, so we now need to do and. Now I don't want to have to redo an entire problem. Anybody else not want to have to? Okay. So you know what we're going to do? Right below that, we're going to pretend the sign was different. So I've got a negative 5 and a negative 1. And if that sign had been y is greater, where would you have shaded? On the inside, okay. Just so we can see what an answer would look like if it was an and problem. With an and problem, you put the x in the middle. Compare it to negative 1 for me. Are you greater than or less than? Less than. For those people that have trouble with arrows again, notice that the arrow points that way, right? Now with an and problem, you keep the exact same sign, you just copy it to the other side, and you write the other number down. And you've got the answer. That is it. Any questions? Pretty easy? Okay. So 90% of this you've already done, right? All right, so practice for tomorrow. 5 problems. That's it, 5. So on another sheet of graph paper, please complete these 5 problems.